The truth is, every place has its asset and its liability. And whenever we hear and see great work from somebody, I know, my tendency is to always get a little bit despondent and victimized and say, well, sure, it worked for him or her because, they had a supportive family, a family that didn't think they were nutso for wanting to throw away their intellectual degrees and go build swales. We deal with it with our interns. Parents call. I'm worried about, I gave them a college education. I didn't expect them to go butcher chickens. Doing menial tasks, that's for brown people. That's for hillbilly rednecks. Inarticulate, tobacco-spitting, trip over the transmission in the front yard country kids. The D students. And so we have this kind of societal prejudice. So I understand. And I know that my tendency is when somebody starts off on this great, success story, my tendency is to think that, well, they have a supportive family. They've got a community that, for some reason, they live somewhere where people just love to spend more money on food. Or, they've got a more supportive spouse. Or obedient children, or better rainfall, or less rainfall, as the case may be. And the fact is that every place has its asset and its liability. And every single one of us has a gift and a talent to bring to the table. And my overall theme of this 1 hour I have to spend with you this morning, my overall theme is that until we have 2 salaries from our enterprise, it is not a business, and it is not sustainable. There's an axiom in Wall Street, and if you read any business magazines and books, there's an axiom that says in any economic sector, when the average practitioner is more than 35 years old, that's an economic sector in decline. A couple of years ago, I was at Nike in Beaverton, Oregon, at their international headquarters. I did a day-long sustainability seminar for internal for Nike. And just for fun, I asked them, of all the world, what's the average age of every single Nike employee in the world? It was 32. Okay? Which just rang true. The average American farmer today is almost 60 years old. 60 years old. The Greenhorns have done a lot to promote the actuarial that's, of course, come out of the land-grant universities. That is the study of the demographics and the profiling of the American farmer. And what that statistic shows that in the next 15 years, 50% of America's farmland is going to change hands. In the next 15 years, 50% of America's farmland is going to change hands. The average farmer is 60 years old. We have not seen 35 years old as an average age of a farmer for a very, very long time. This is an economic sector in decline. Monsanto notwithstanding. Okay? But this is a sector that is in trouble. But what that means is that most of the equity in agriculture is owned by people who have done their life's most creative work. You ever get tired of, what are these farmers thinking? Why don't they try something new? Why do they just take, the information from Monsanto or the pork checkoff or Smithfield or Tyson, why don't they be innovative? Because when you're over 50, you quit being innovative. There's not enough energy to pick yourself up from failure. I mean, when you're 50, you want to just kind of, you're not 20 anymore. It takes a lot of effort to try to figure out what works. Because innovation is expensive in time and effort and failure. And so the older you get, the less innovative you become. And that's why CEOs of large corporations tend to get pushed out, as they hit about 60, because they become risk averse. And it's being able to handle risk that creates the cutting edge of innovation. All right? So, historically, familial wealth, tribal wealth, historically was created as old people leveraged their experience on youthful energy and enthusiasm. The old people remembered where the spring was that never went dry, where the swirling air around that butte is warm and a place to shelter in a blizzard. That's matriarchal and patriarchal memory and experience. But if you don't have any youthful energy to leverage it on, what good is it? So many times our farms run the life cycle of the age cycle of the person running them. So, you have this farm, you come into it at 20 and 30, and you're all full of vim, vigor, and vitality, and you make this thing go, and then things start to slow down at 50 and at 60. And by 70, you're old and alone. And the average American farmer is aging alone. When Teresa and I started on the farm, I said, what are our goals for this farm? And one of the top ones was, we want to age so that the only arguments on this farm are the grandkids arguing over who gets to spend the day with grandma and grandpa. And today, our grandkids do live with us on the farm, not with us in our house, but with us on the farm. 10, 8, and 6, and the joy of my life is we have 4 generations on the farm. Mom turned 90 in December. She's a very active 90-year-old, drives and dances and square dances and sings and all this stuff. She pops into the house, and she's in this singing group that sings at nursing homes, for entertainment, and she'll pop in the house. She's 90, right? She pops in the house and says, hey, we're going over to the care center, whatever, to sing to the old people. She's 10 years older than most of them, But the joy of my life is to have 4 generations on the farm. That's a lot of memory, isn't it? That's a lot of roots. That's a lot of ecological umbilical connection. Okay? And that, dear people, is continuity. Here's the deal. When you ask people why they want to farm, and you just kind of brainstorm it in a session, the things that come up are things about lifestyle, independence, self-reliance, healthy food, great place to raise kids, all those kinds of things. They're wonderful. Very seldom does somebody yell out when you're doing a brainstorming session on why do you want to farm? I want to get rich! Now, that's not anywhere near the top of my goal either. But you know what? If we want something that's satisfying, if we want something that the kids want, if we want something that has continuity to it, money is part of the equation, no matter how you cut it. And I'm convinced that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of young people ready to enter something viscerally fulfilling and satisfying, that are being held back because they really don't believe you can make a living farming. If you really thought you could make a white-collar salary farming, I'm convinced there's plenty of young people ready to do it. I know because we had last fall, we do our intern acceptance thing, so we open it August 1 to August 14. We open it up for interns, and we had more than 500 interest queries for our internship program. More than 500 for 10 spots. Okay? It is just accelerating. And other farms that do it that I've talked to, same thing, same thing. I think there's a hunger and a thirst among our young people. Here's the problem, though. When the old people can't get out, or I'm sorry, reverse it. When young people can't get in, the old people can't get out. So if you brainstorm impediments to entry of farming, what do you hear? You know, a lot of people want to farm. They know why they want to farm. You say, well, why don't people farm then? I mean, these sound great. Self-reliance and lifestyle and being your own boss and eating good food and, you know, being in a beautiful office, you know, where you go out and you can, you know, commune with the red-winged blackbirds every day. I mean, makes a pretty office. I mean, people pay a lot of money to go experience for 2 days what I see every day. All right? So if this is so alluring, why don't more people do it? Number one, capitalization. Right? The cost of land, cost of getting in. So you got these huge hurdles. Number two, lack of information. I don't know what to do. I've got this deep yearning to do something, but I don't know what to do. All right? You know, these are impediments. Number three is there's no money in it. You know, all of my family tells me there's no money in it. All of my friends tell me there's no money in it. You know, and when I left outside employment, September 24, 1982, big day in my life. I walked out of that office, and every single person in my life said it was the stupidest thing I'd ever done. There was no encouragement. There was only, you know, the teacher said, "I'm sorry we wasted our time on you." You know, your college friend said, "Oh, what a waste of a life." But we had a dream, and we wanted those things. And so, you know, money is a big deal. There's just no money in it. So how do we overcome this? How do we create going concerns, farms that employ more than one old hermit curmudgeon, okay, that are exciting places to be, that are magnetic to young people, and then how do we reduce those impediments to entry? So, you know, this has a multi-generational flavor to it, what I'm going to share with you. So let's just take it from the beginning. And that is that there is not a piece of property in the world that is fully developed. And when I say developing property, I don't mean strip malls and expressways and condominiums, okay? When I say development, I mean development ecologically. You see, we have this idea in our culture that to mess around with nature can't be done with integrity. This is why I'm such a fan of permaculture. You know, my first introduction to permaculture was when I was in high school and read the Mother Earth News Plowboy interview with Bill Mollison. All right? And as soon as I read that thing, I was, 15, 16. As soon as I read that thing, I said, you know, that right there, that's the deal. You know, the stacking, the complementarity, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the zones, all that. But one of the reasons that I'm such a fan of permaculture is because it answers this societal guilt question of how do we interact with this ecological womb as a nurturer. You know, the radical environmentalist agenda in our culture is so guilt-plagued by the civilizational conquistador mentality that we assume the only way we can interact with nature is to extricate ourselves from nature. And we have environmentalism by abandonment. The only thing that we can do with integrity with nature is to make a state park. You know, lock it up. Make a wilderness area. Get people out of there. We can't desecrate it with human breath. And the assumption is that whatever is out there right now is the best it can possibly be. And it's jaundiced by this historical record of our pillaging, rape, and desertification and destruction of the earth. And I understand, I get that, and I repent in sackcloth and ashes for everything my ancestors have done. But then when I look in the mirror, I say, so why do I have a big brain and opposing thumbs? Monkeys can't do that, opposing thumbs. Why am I endowed with this big brain and opposing thumbs? Is it to doom me forever to be the most efficacious earth rapist on the planet forever? Or could it just be that I've been endowed with these gifts to come alongside our ecological womb as a caresser, as a lover, as a masseuse to massage? I think I could run for election here today. To massage our womb and make refinements and tweaks and loving, humble, appropriate changes in order to ultimately turn more solar energy into biomass accumulation that will feed animals and soil animals and decomposers and create more soil to be able to better metabolize more solar energy into biomass. I find it just an amazing thing that 95 pounds of every 100 pounds of biomass is pure solar energy. Is that not cool? Something as esoteric and mystical as sunbeams. Could somebody go out and bring me in a sunbeam? We can go out, we can stand in the warmth of it, we see them, but how do you, right? They're just out there, but how do you do it? And through photosynthetic activity, something as unweighable, as unholdable as sunbeams turns into something solid that we can weigh and we can hand it back and forth and we can eat it and we can, isn't that cool? The earth is on a weight gain program. And we have the privilege and the honor of coming alongside this marvelous, awesome creation to help the earth in this biomass weight gain program. So there's not a piece of land in the world, in my opinion, my farm, your farm, Sepp Holzer's farm, there's not a place in the world that is fully developed. And I guarantee you go to any of the speakers that you're going to have during these next couple of days and ask them, what's next? And we'll all have this list. We feel like we haven't even dumped our toe in the water yet. Man, I can't even sleep at night for the opportunities and the possibilities we have envisioned to continue to develop and put a water line in here and another pond in there and another solarium on that building and a mushroom growing place on there. It just, there's no end to it. And to be able to, take those old weedy, junky woods and chip them up and put all the growth on good, virulent, vibrant, young, juvenile stems, and convert all that junky stuff into decomposable biomass and help nature move this successional plan forward. Okay? There's no end to it. But the average farmer is tired. You go to the average 60-year-old farmer and say, you know how much more you can do with your farm? He's going, what? I'm worn out, man. What do you want me to do? I'm already working 80 hours a week. You want me to work 100? I'm 60 years old, man. And the thought of doing more is just, it's preposterous. It's impossible. And so my first message to all of us is that there is not a piece of land that has been fully developed. Let's take an icon of the American landscape. An old barn. A bank barn even. You know, the ones that in New England now, you know, they have all these programs to help, you know, to try to prop up these things, because every tourist brochure of New England, you know, has these beautiful old gambrel, you know, and post and beam bank barns, you know, and they're all falling down because, let me tell you a secret, they were a terrible invention. Probably the single biggest complaint in my book, You Can Farm, is feedback from people who take great umbrage at me saying, if you buy a piece of land with a bank barn on it, in your first year, tear it down and reuse the lumber to build something functional. Because bank barns are dark, wet, and drafty, and have killed more animals and wrinkled more paint and rotted more lumber than you can shake a stick at. So, but they're icons of the American landscape. So is there a way to use them for something different? So I was up in Vancouver, BC, out in Cowichan Bay, met a guy up there that had this 150-year-old bank barn, lived on this little farm that has been in his family for 6 generations. His great-great-grandfather had built this old German post and beam bank barn, but it's obsolete. You can't get into them with any equipment. They're just obsolete. So guess what he did? He cleaned it all out, mounted some spotlights in the post and beams around, went to the Home Depot and got a bunch of 4x8 sheets of cheap plywood, painted them white, hung them on the walls, and now does a juried fall art show that attracts 30,000 people a fall. And he sells all of his pastured livestock and produce as in a concession stand to the people who come to the juried art show on his farm. Now, somebody might say, well, that doesn't sound like farming to me. And that's another of our problems. We have so compartmentalized and provincialized the word farm that the multifaceted things that used to happen on farms are not allowed there anymore. They've been marginalized, criminalized, demonized, as if, the only thing that a farm can do is produce raw commodities to be value added by, urban businesses using non-neighborhood labor. Ooh. So I'm talking about a farm like you see when you go to Williamsburg. You go to Williamsburg in Virginia. It's in my back door. It's only about 3 hours away. Go to Williamsburg, and what you see there is behind every homestead a bustling hive of activity. Barrel makers, the cobblers, candle makers, fat renderers, hide tanners, spoke makers. I mean, just all this activity going on farms. I mean, the greenies in California have made it so impossible to bring people onto the land that even second-generation farmers can't build a second house on agricultural land. Because we all know people shouldn't be on farms. And so we have compartmentalized and we have marginalized the opportunity on these farms. So when we talk about development, we're talking about taking infrastructure, taking the land. Listen, when you build a pond that allows you to double the production on a given piece of land, let's say that cost, let's say if you prorate it out over the acreage, let's say that development of that pond a pond in my country, a dam in Texas, or tanks in Texas, dams in Australia. All right, but anyway, a pond. All right, it's something less than a lake. Okay. If you build that, even if the cost is $1,000 per acre for that development, but allows you to double production and create forgiveness and resilience in that landscape, you've just, in essence, bought a farm for $1,000 an acre. If a $1,000 an acre investment can allow you to double the acre. See, farm kids grow up with this great big sin of covetousness in their life. Most farm families, in order to assimilate, who want to bring on a second generation, a second paycheck onto the farm, the only thing within their paradigm is, well, we've got to expand our land base. We grow oranges. This farm only produces enough for one salary to make two. We've got to add more acreage for oranges, or beef cattle, or dairy, or whatever, okay? But it's all, or wheat, or soybeans, whatever. It's always about gobbling up the neighbor's farms in order to have enough land base to now generate two salaries. And my theme is, we haven't even begun to leverage the resource base under our own feet. So on our farm, where the average farm in our county, we're in a cattle growing region, grosses in $250 an acre on beef cattle. On our farm, we're grossing in $8,000 an acre because we grow cattle and pigs and chickens and turkeys and egg layers and even rabbits, okay? And you add all those stackable complementary enterprises on the land base, suddenly you're generating a pile of money which can employ the next generation, because we're not just a sole enterprise deal. Industrial agriculture is all about monospeciation. In fact, the new Obama Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, of course administered by the new food safety czar, Michael Taylor, who of course was the 10-year attorney for Monsanto, who brought genetically modified organisms to the world. Trust me, he doesn't like compost piles. And he definitely does not like pastured chickens. In fact, they're trying to criminalize a farm that produces both produce and animals. We can't have animals and produce on the same farm because of poop. Well, see, their paradigm of poop is industrial CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation, slurry systems. That's toxic stuff. They're not talking about. Yeah, in California, they're making mescaline mix farmers sign affidavits to prohibit any child under 5 from stepping foot on their farm. Diapers. Yeah. I mean, what does it say about a food system when children can't touch it? I mean, we live in strange days. Folks, this ain't normal. It's not normal to deny people. Look, if you got to walk through sheep dip and put on a hazmat suit to go visit your food, you might not want to eat it. But in the orthodoxy of our day, it doesn't matter how toxic the food is, as long as you wash it well enough with chlorine, it's fine. Because sterile equals safe. I got news for you. You and I aren't sterile. If we could take an electron microscope picture of this room right here, the things floating in the air would make your skin curl. All right. Here's the point. When we talk about creating multiple salaries on a farm, they're going to be as a result of this kind of ecological and infrastructural development. back 35, 40 years ago when Dad and I were brainstorming about our farm, we just pulled out a piece of paper I still have today in the goals file. And we brainstormed, how many white-collar salaries could we generate from these 100 acres? And in no time, we just wrote down 25 of them. While the average farmer is completely beholden to the idea of scarcity and we can't do any more here, we feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. And when you start building a community of complementary enterprises, suddenly there are opportunities for people who don't necessarily want to be farmers, but who want to be connected to it in some way. I mean, you get 20 families on a place, and suddenly there's room for a full-time mechanic. There's room for a full-time, the lady that just loves babies and kids, full-time babysitter. How about a full-time accountant to do everybody's taxes? Balance your bank statement. Okay? I mean, there are all sorts of enterprises available. But it starts with believing that I can do more with this property than is being done. And that is a foreign concept to most farmers today. They really don't believe that this piece of land can be massaged into more production than it could otherwise. All right, so we start with this development. This development needs to be primarily portable. Okay? I want you to think with me a little bit. And the more you can make portable infrastructure, the more flexibility you build into that farm. Not only is portable infrastructure very, very cheap, but it's spontaneous. When you have portable infrastructure, you don't have to own the land. Another theme of this time I get to spend with you right now is all about you don't have to own the land. I mean, the amount of abandoned land in this country is unbelievable. We have all these interns and apprentices through us, and I would say our average intern, when they leave, they have the options of 10 opportunities out there. We've never had one had any trouble, I mean, even if they don't have a penny to their name, being able to get a hold of a piece of land. Cornell University did a study about 4 years ago, a 2-year study, where they looked in New York State and said, how much farmland in the last 15 years, so they went back 15 years to 2008, and said, how much farmland in 15 years has been abandoned? Not converted to strip malls, not converted to roads, not converted to, suburbia, but simply abandoned, that's now essentially turning into wilderness. It's simply been abandoned. In New York State alone, you ready for the number? 3.1 million acres. 3.1 million acres. We had an apprentice from Ithaca area. He went back up, he finished with us, went home, and within 30 days, he had 3 different landowners come to him, unsolicited, begging him to come and do something with their land, a total of 1,000 acres, rent-free. Would you just please come and do something with it? If you know how to make aesthetically and aromatically, sensually romantic landscapes, you will never lack for a piece of land to work on. Because landowners are desperate for somebody to come and do something other than just, me hiring a neighbor to come and bush hog it twice a year. All right? This is the whole point of Greg Judy's work with No Risk Ranch. Now, he lives in a really cool place where agriculture is so depressed that there's nobody around. And And so he's got all this real cheap land available. We don't live in an area like that. We live in an extremely agriculturally, vibrant, as far as that's concerned, a place. And so there's a lot of land. But even where we are, we now lease 9 farms, 9 places. So we've taken our, 550 acres and added another 1,500 to it. Arguably, $100 million worth of land that we get to use for $25,000 a year. Why would you want to own it? And if you have a portable farm with egg mobiles and cattle shelters and portable chicken shelters and your garden, your gardening tools and your tall tunnels, and where everything is portable, you don't have to own the land. And that completely divorces the farm from the land. Suddenly, you have low capitalization opportunities. And the equity is in management and customers, not in stationary infrastructure and land. When we have equity that's movable, see, our unfair advantage on why are we getting all these, why are these people coming to us? It looks like, over the weekend we just picked up 2 more. These are people coming to us, would you please do something with our land? Why? Because our unfair advantage, and it's not unfair, but that's what business people call it. Our unfair advantage is that we know how to make a beautiful landscape. And if there's one thing that permaculture does, is make beautiful landscapes. By the way, I'm saying that guardedly because I also know that permaculture is known for being, whatever. All right? So we've got this tension in permaculture. And I would encourage you and challenge you in your projects. Look at them like a food writer would look at them. Look at them like National Geographic would look at them. Look at them like a neighbor would look at them. There is such a thing as order. And let's let permaculture design show functionality of order that is aesthetically penetrating and magnetizing in our communities. Okay? What we want is for visitors to leave saying, man, I'd like that in my backyard, not leave saying, whoa, man, I sure don't want a backyard that looks like that. Okay? So have a place to put your unfinished projects. Maybe behind a grape arbor screen. Okay? There is a place for order. But I want you to think about when a farm has its equity tied up in management. See, that's what we know that they don't know. We do this, mob stocking, herbivorous solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. There's not a farmer in the state that knows how to do that. That's an unfair advantage, you see. And we don't have to borrow that from a bank. We don't have to put that in a business plan and ask for investors. Because the equity is information and management. And when the equity of your farm is portable and in information and management, suddenly you have eliminated the need to plunk all that nest egg and that hard-won capital into the land. Now suddenly you got wiggle room. See? You got wiggle room. In fact, there are a lot of people today that think we in the U.S. are moving toward a 2-tiered system, much more like Europe, where you have wealthy people own land because it's a defensive economic measure. I've got money and I don't want to lose it, so I'm in for the long haul. I'm going to buy land. And land management will be an economic offensive mechanism. So the land managers will be people who aren't wealthy but are accumulating wealth through land management, and the land owners are people that are wealthy and want to hold on to it. You know, Prince Charles is 1,300 acres. He doesn't plant the flowers. It's managed by multiple 99-year tenurages. Now, you know, I know that this just sounds like anti-American to even talk about the difficulty of getting land. But see, we've got to get away from this notion that we need to own all this land because the ratios are so different. My little soundbite for urban people that don't get this is this. When our family came and bought the farm in 1961, I was just 4 years old. We bought the farm for $90 an acre. Okay? 550 acres, $90 an acre. Feeder calves, like 500-pound feeder calves, were selling for $30 a hundredweight. Okay? That's a 3-to-1 ratio. Are you with me? Today, that land is worth $8,000 an acre, and feeder calves are selling for $150 a hundredweight. Wow, yay, that's great, you know. So calves have gone up 5 times, and the land has gone up 80 times. So now there's a, 150 to 800 is a, instead of a 3-to-1, it's a, I can't even do the math in my head fast enough, but you with me? That's why what worked for Grandpa won't work for us. And too often, land preservationists, the land preservation movement, is trying to freeze rural landscapes in a 1950s pastoral paradigm. And what we have now are families often that are in these land preservation, land easement, conservation easement type arrangements, having to sue the trustees to allow them to now put a milk bottling plant or a farm, a produce stand, or a commercial kitchen, or do a children's day camp, an ecology adventure seminar. Okay? Goodness, it's illegal for me to write books in my farmhouse. That's illegal because it's manufacturing in an agricultural zone. We're not supposed to be doing information, educational-based things. This is a farm. You're supposed to just produce commodities to be value added by the smart people. See? And unfortunately, the land preservation and conservation easement movements have bought that hook, line, and sinker, that fundamentally segregated approach to our food and farmscape. And if we look at the historical normalcy and how these systems work, ultimately they are extremely integrated, not segregated. And so what we're trying to do in order to bring on more people to the farm, we can't just be producing, especially if it's a small farm, we can't be producing just raw commodities because the margins are so slow. A small person can't produce enough volume to compete with the big guys. The fact is, the big guys do make money. They make it on volume, on pennies a chicken, all right? But if you don't produce 1 million chickens, you've got to make it way more, which means you've got to now create value adding on your place. And so we have to bring value adding. We can't just sell raw commodity. And so one of the ways to bring additional salaries on a farm is to value add everything. I mean, there's a guy in Vermont that has an 18-acre woodlot, and he makes a full-time living off of just an 18-acre woodlot. You know why? Because he's got a woodworking shop. And he takes every single piece that he cuts into an ultimate value. He even takes, when you cut a tree and then anyway, you got a stump, okay? He takes the chainsaw, cuts right down on the ground level, and you know how all stumps have this kind of flare at the ground level? He dries them real slow, paints them with wax, puts them in a basement so they dry real slow over a couple of years, lets them dry, then brings them out, belt sands them, flips them over, puts a couple legs in the bottom, and sells them for $100 because every one is unique. I mean, every tree, every flare. Are you with me? It's very cool, you know, to think about being able to take every stump, or even half the stumps that you might cut in a biomass reclamation project and turn into $100 a stump at a craft fair. Okay? That's value adding. But see, it's illegal for us to have a woodworking shop on our farm because we're in an agricultural zone. And the greenies and the segregationists of land preservation have deemed that a woodworking shop is manufacturing. So the only thing we can legally do is sell our trees to a lumber mill so they can be exported to Japan. Okay? Fortunately, we can have a portable sawmill, but only for our lumber. If a neighbor has a log that he wants us to cut, it's illegal for us to cut his log. Okay? Because cutting logs is manufacturing, and we can't have manufacturing on farms. See? Well, don't ask and don't tell is good. And so I would encourage you, you know how many times you read material for people like us, and after it tells about all these things that you could maybe do, you know how always the last sentence is, check with your local authorities to see about legality? Wrong! Wrong! It's a lot easier to ask forgiveness than permission. So just do it. And when somebody doesn't like it, they'll let you know. And then you can deal with it. Okay? I mean, if we had asked permission for the stuff that we wanted to do, we wouldn't even exist today. I mean, the government's tried to close us down I can't, I wrote a book, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, right? And remember, everything I want to do is illegal, not everything I do is illegal. A lot of people enter it. But it's true, and I remind our bureaucrats in the state, that if they had had their say throughout the years, we wouldn't exist for National Geographic to profile and Smithsonian to profile and Food Inc. to profile and whatever. And I remind them, you just remember, folks, if you bureaucrats had had your way, we would not exist. So think about it a little bit. Leverage your resources. Do you have a tractor? It should never sit parked. Alan Nation's rule of thumb is if you're not putting 2,000 hours a year on your tractor, you need to get rid of it and rent one. Okay? Infrastructure is expensive. Do you have a building? Do you have a shed? Do you have a hoop house? In our hoop, and I'll show you this in the next session. I'll show you all this stuff. But I'm trying to lay a broad groundwork. In the next session, I'll show you the pictures. We got 300 pictures. But where you're leveraging your infrastructure, a hoop house. If you rotate that among different species of plants and different types of animals, you create pathogen cul-de-sacs, okay? Dead ends, because most pathogens don't cross-speciate. So if you have a piece of machinery or a building, always think about how can we not let this thing sit here? I mean, do you have, a winter shed where you might have, those of you who are in colder areas like we are, where you might have winter animals in it, chickens, cows, pigs, whatever. If you do, when it's cleaned out, you can have square dances in there. You can dry flowers. You can have an art gallery. You can, do all sorts of things in there. So how can we put more stuff through our infrastructure? Okay. What's my time like? All right. The next thing, as we develop this farm, so just to review, we're developing this farm. First of all, it starts with a belief that the farm is not anywhere near potential. My farm, your farm, anybody's farm. It's not near potential. That's number one. Number two, we're going to have all of our infrastructure as much as possible portable. We're going to put our equity in management, information, and we're going to value add. We're going to stack enterprises. We're going to leverage our infrastructure, our buildings and machinery. Let me give you a little statistic. In the United States, the average farm, it takes $4 worth of buildings and machinery on a farm, $4 worth of buildings and machinery to turn $1 in annual gross sales. Okay? 4 to 1. On our farm, it's 50 cents to $1. That's an 800% difference in ratio between capitalization and gross annual sales. Does everybody understand? That's huge, okay? And that's what this kind of portable, information-driven kind of system can do for you. Now, the next piece of this is marketing. Marketing. And this is where farmers start either going to sleep, heading for the, for high grass, heading for the toilet room, whatever. Why? Because farmers are notoriously poor marketers. You know why? Because most farmers don't like people. I mean, they're far more intimate with their tractor than their spouse. And don't read any more into that. I mean, just they spend more time. This is not kinky, all right? It's a fact of life, all right? But it's true. The other, and so I don't know anyone who gets an agriculture degree from a land-grant university who takes marketing speech courses, marketing courses. See, to be a marketer, you got to be a gregarious storyteller schmoozer. Okay? In fact, if you read the birth order book, 80% of all marketers are lastborns in families. That's because the little one can't beat them, physically, so they got to, cerebrally manipulate the rest of the family. So you want a marketer, look for the lastborn. Okay? You want an engineer, look for the firstborn. They're the ones where everything was just perfect, The baby book, How's your tie? Going to kindergarten? Yes, And if the kindergartner takes a briefcase to school, it's an only-born. The middle-borns are entrepreneurs because they're the ones that got lost. That's me, Don't have a baby book. So middleborns have to figure out their own thing. See, those are the entrepreneurs. Anyway, that's just a free sidelight there. All right. But this marketing thing, it's not something that farmers have been encouraged to do because farmers are supposed to be colonial serfs, peasants, growing raw commodities for the brains who process them, manufacture them, and turn the chicken into, Dino's the dinosaur's nuggets to be sold in microwavable, frozen, SKU-numbered boxes at the supermarket. By people that make catchy graphics and are able to, put a pretty little rooster crowing on a fence by a red gambrel barn, by a silo, and a pretty pastured corral, on the logo for people to buy the nuggets. We actually have to tell our customers that, nuggets in the form of Dino's the dinosaur is not a muscle group on a chicken. You have to explain this. But marketing. The other reason farmers don't like to market is because we're so personally wrapped up in what we produce that it becomes part of our persona, our self-actualization. And the thought of somebody not buying from us is too emotionally crippling. What do you mean you don't want my eggs? I bought these little chicks. I stayed up with them. I fixed the light. The two I stepped on, I buried, and and I brought them into the, to the living room in a box when the rainstorm came, and, oh, and you don't want my eggs, oh, nobody loves me, everybody hates me. We're so close to our production that the thought of denial is personally excruciating, right? And so we don't want to do the marketing. All right. I'm just telling you what has to be done on a profitable farm that is vibrant enough to attract and offer additional opportunities for partners on it. See, because I believe that a functional business has to have multi-generationalism and at least 2 salaries. If you don't have 2 salaries and multi-generationalism, there is no regenerative capacity in the business. Now, a farm is more than a business. It's not only a business, but it is also a business. And until that farm generates 2 salaries, it doesn't have a continuity plan. I try not to use succession because succession has, this cloud of, funerals and death and all that stuff. So I use the word farm continuity plan. All right. If we're going to have a continuity plan, we've got to have more than 1 salary, and we've got to have multi-generationalism. All right. So I'm just telling you what has to be done. I'm not saying you have to do this. And so the successful continuity farm will embrace and find gifts and talents that complement the people so that we have all the gifts and talents necessary. The fact is that generally good farmers and good marketers and good accountants and good engineering, those gifts and talents don't normally grow on the same pair of legs. See? And one of the things one of the highest frustration points I have when I do farm conferences is when I have, 40 to 50, 55-year-old farmers come up to me and say, well, I don't want anybody else around here. It's me and Matilda, and we did this so we wouldn't have to talk to anybody. Well, then you don't have a business and you don't have a continuity plan. All you've got is a job that can keep you busy until you can't do it anymore. But you don't have a viability thing, okay? And what I want us to be, if you want to farm, I don't want you to have to farm like it's some sort of a bad addiction that has to be subsidized by an off-farm job. You go to the average farm in America, honk the horn at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Nobody's there. Why? They're all in town to get enough money to support the farm addiction. I want to liberate you from that enslavement of working for the man. Let somebody else take that job. And let's come back to our farms full time. That means that we have to have a whole. And that whole is going to be production, processing, accounting, distribution, marketing, and customers. We've got to have a way to, we've got to be able to interact with people. Okay? I understand generally a person can't do that all. My wife Teresa keeps the books. Okay? But I understand that I can't balance a checkbook. I love to keep cow grazing records and all those sorts of things, but I really don't like balancing a checkbook. So that's what. So it takes more than one. So we've got to embrace and bring people to us, and marketing is one of those components that will bring the best and brightest to us because it's challenging enough to bring that. So when we look at our farms, at the ability to create continuity and multi-salaries and multi-generations, there's a full cornucopia of opportunities. This is not a place of scarcity. It is a place of abundance. And every single piece of land, whether it's in a desert or a rainforest, is absolutely a place of abundance. The earth is not a reluctant partner that we have to force and make and move, and you're going to do this for me. She is a loving partner that is wanting to bequeath on us abundance if we will love her like we are supposed to. God help us to do it. Thank you so much for visiting with me. Thank you.